I'm John Batchelor. This is the Jon Batchelor Show. Gabriel Giffords is alive. That is the good news. And we are very carefully approaching all of the news that's moving around the edges of the massacre in Tucson. A federal judge is dead. A significant staffer, Gabe Zimmerman, or serving Gabriel Giffords, is dead. So are 4 others, including a 9-year-old girl who was born on 9/11/2001. Through the weekend reporting this story, I've focused on that detail because in another age, that is a curse on America. Right now, however, America is dealing with this intelligently and aggressively. We're talking about it. The President of the United States, it is announced, will travel to Arizona on Wednesday for a memorial service. There was a moment of silence today throughout the country and throughout the world where Americans are about this attack. We learn more about the shooter, and the more we learn, the sadder and more incoherent he becomes and his motives become. This is a 22-year-old male. He's a man-child. And his appearance in court was alarming with the shaved head and the unusual smile, because all the evidence is pointing to a man who has been mentally ill for some time. The deterioration is testified to by his classmates. We await the FBI's full report. We need everything confirmed. So I want to concentrate tonight on Washington and how Washington is dealing with this tragedy and this crisis. Remember, a member of Congress was shot down doing her job, meeting the people, as she often does, in the 8th Arizona Congressional District. A staffer was killed helping her. Another staffer helped her stay alive. This is a story about Capitol Hill. The vast number of staffers and their families who are watching this very carefully. The death of a staffer is a blow to the United States of America, just as the death of a member of Congress is a blow, and the death of a federal judge, a significant federal judge, John Roll. To help tell this story tonight, I begin with the Senate, because Jon Kyl is an Arizona senator. He's also a leader of the Senate, the Republican Party in the Senate. And David Drucker, who covers the Senate for Roll Call, spoke with Senator Kyl at the end of last week, a very successful week for the gathering of the 112th Congress, the day before the crisis. And Jon Kyl has been on the news, and he's commenting in Arizona, and he's a careful and conciliatory and extremely concerned citizen from Arizona in the United States. But this is the day before, and Jon Kyl was already looking to a new tone for the 112th Congress, one not of rancor, but of working together, of fraternity, of sorority, of freedom in the United States Senate, really looking back to the old days when the Senate worked together. David, good evening to you. Jon Kyl, what is his position in the Republican Party in the Senate?
He's the number 2 ranking Republican in the U.S. Senate, John, and good evening. He is the Republican whip, which means he is the chief vote counter. His job is to round up votes to either oppose or pass legislation. He's a lawyer by trade. He's in the middle of his 3rd term and hasn't told us yet whether or not he's going to run for a 4th in 2012. But he's a person described by his colleagues as extremely patient, extremely hardworking, and extremely thorough and knowledgeable. And he's a very precise individual. It's the word I use for him. When he talks, all senators, when they talk, their words mean something, but Jon Kyl is always very careful about the words that he chooses, and most of them have specific purpose, and that's, I think, has served him well as a leader, and at the very least has definitely earned him the respect of senators on both sides of the aisle.
His remark to you, David, you say that he's looking to whip votes, which is a difficult job and a vigorous job in either the House or the Senate, looking to pass legislation, not defeat it. Explain that, please.
Well, John, as you know, throughout the 111th Congress, Republicans were in a severe minority and didn't really have the power to do anything. The best they could hope for was to successfully play defense. For House Republicans, they really couldn't do a thing except work the media. Senate Republicans, because of the filibuster rules and other rules that give individual senators a lot of power to block legislation and propose amendments to bills, did have some power, but with 40 and then 41 senators and then 42 for the lame duck session, the most they could hope for would be to block what the Obama administration and what Harry Reid, as the majority leader, wanted to push through. That's about all they could hope for. But now, with a 53 to 47 Senate, Democrats still being in the majority, it's a whole new ball game. Even though a 6-seat majority isn't too bad, in the Senate, 47 seats means you have a lot of leverage. And because the Republicans now control the House of Representatives, Senator Kyl and his conference can be in a position to take Republican legislation that comes over from the House and possibly find a way to get it over the finish line. If not, come up with a compromise that could get through the Senate, that they could then send back to the House and see if they've got the Republican votes for it. So it gives them a chance to play a little offense, and particularly with some vulnerable Democrats politically who are running for re-election in 2012, they might be able to form some bipartisan coalitions there. And I think that Jon Kyl made this point to me. Harry Reid is no dummy. He understands the Senate, and he understands how to get things done when he wants to. And the kind of legislation that Democrats were pushing last year, I doubt they're going to push because they know it can't happen. And so it's possible that Harry Reid and his team will be looking to push legislation that is a little bit more moderate in tone, because that is the only kind of bill that is going to have a chance to get through the Senate for the next few years.
Jon Kyl was the leader of the opposition to the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, the START II treaty, that was successfully passed by the Democratic majority during the lame duck. But from your conversation with him, David, it looks like no hard feelings here. He's looking ahead.
That's correct. I mean, if you work in the U.S. Congress as a member, holding grudges will not allow you to move forward. And it's, in a sense, like a football season. You cannot focus on the last game you lost, or there's no way you're going to win the next game. Jon Kyl's a professional. He won one of these treaty fights in '98. He lost this one. But there's already much to do that he's focused on, and it doesn't do him any good to keep looking back. And it's not in his demeanor. He's definitely aggressive. He definitely wants to win on the issues that he cares about. But part of being in the U.S. Senate is to have the long view and to play the long game, and I think that's, in a sense, what he does.
He will turn 69 years old in April. His re-election is in 2012 if he runs. What's your sense, David? Is he looking to stay?
I have to think that with the Republicans having, at least right now, such a good chance of winning the majority in 2012, just given the electoral map, there are 23 Democrats up for re-election in 2012 in the Senate, only 9 Republicans. They have a really good chance to get in the majority, and when you're in the majority, you can get bills across the finish line, or at least set the agenda. And I have to think that's attractive to him after the past few years. But he's just one of those sort of old school guys. He doesn't have a computer on his desk in his office, which I just learned on Friday when I sat down with him, that he wants to take 1 year off after the last election from politics, at least publicly, and not discuss it.
Right.
I think it's frustrated with us as reporters when we insist on that. So I tend to think he's going to run, but I can't guarantee you that he's going to run.
Final irony, David. You had this conversation with Senator Kyl the day before the shooting, and he's already looking to calm things down and to speak very carefully with his colleagues. Anticipating or just irony, David? How do you read this?
I think it's just ironic. I think that Jon Kyl would like the Senate to be a little bit more moderate this time around, because that is good for what he wants as a member of the minority. It's also not in his nature to be a rabble-rouser, if you will. I think he would just like to put his head down and get things done, and the best way to do that is when people are talking. So I think it was a little ironic that, that he said that, and that I happened to sit down with the senator from Arizona, one day before. But other than that, I think just irony here.
David Drucker, roll call covering the Senate. Jon Kyl, the whip for the minority in the United States Senate from Arizona. I'm John Batchelor.